Episode number 297 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast, a space where you can find empowerment on your fertility journey. I'm your host, Michelle Orovitz, and I wanted to pop in before we get started to mention that if you haven't already heard, I've released my new book, The Way of Fertility, that has been created for those who have tried everything to conceive and are simply unsure of what else they can do. This book shares tried and true wisdom from ancient teachings along with modern research that supports much of what has been taught for centuries. It has been made with love, and the stories shared will serve to awaken hope within you. If you'd like to give it a test drive, I offer the first chapter for free, and you can find a link with more information in the episode notes. I would also like to extend an invitation to you as part of our beautiful community to share your thoughts and experiences by leaving a review of the podcast. Your words have incredible power to inspire others who are also seeking comfort on their fertility journey. And for anyone who has already left a review, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Welcome to the podcast, Jenny.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you about this amazing topic and your new book. And I would love for you to first start with introducing yourself and your background, how you got into writing this recent book about where we came from.
Yeah, okay. Well, my name is Jenny Powers. I grew up as an Air Force brat, so I kind of moved all over the country and got to play basketball at the University of Colorado when I studied chemical engineering. But then I went back to school to study immunology, and that's what I got my Ph.D. in. Studying, the innate immune system, macrophages and cell signaling and stuff like that. But I felt, while it was interesting and fascinating, I felt like I wasn't doing what I think was in my heart, which was to be a writer. So when I had my kids, it was really kind of a nice time to make a break from academic science and move into trying to become a writer. And I actually started writing fiction books for kids, middle grade books from 8 to 12-year-olds. So I have a couple of finished manuscripts. Nothing's been published yet. But, I needed some sort of part-time, easy, kind of fit in my schedule job. And it was incredible that I found this job opportunity with my co-author, Luke Comer. He actually was looking for someone to research one of his other books, which is a nutrition book. And when I called to interview with him, he's like, "Oh, I already found a nutritionist." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's too bad. This sounds like a really good fit for me." And he's like, "Well, what about this idea?" And so something that he had been holding in his head for the last 10 years. And it kind of started when he was looking at nutrition, how far away are we from how we are living right now? How far away are we from how we evolved to live? And it kind of applies to so many different aspects of our lives. In this first book, we cover, kind of the basics: sleep, nutrition, work and rest, and our relationship with nature. But we actually have other books in the series, hopefully, that will come out that cover more like social groups and cultural things. And all of these things, we're no longer living in accord with our biology. And it sounded fascinating to me because there are several parts of that where I had already started feeling not quite connected. So the one that really stood out to me when I was writing this was the work, because I was a PhD student and then a postdoc, and I worked 70 hours a week, and I was exhausted, and then I had also, in my late teens, early 20s, started suffering from depression, and then feeling really connected to the environment, but then seeing what's happening to the environment. So I had already had some of these things really affecting my life. And when Luke presented me with this idea. He's like, well, what do you think about researching this and collaborating with me for a book on this? I was like, this sounds amazing, because not only do I get to use my experience as a researcher, but I get to write, and I get to write about something that I grew more and more passionate about as I researched it. I like to think that I'm kind of just like a reader at the very beginning. When you pick up the book, you don't know anything, right? Um, so when I picked up this project, it was a total blank slate. And it was amazing to be able to have the freedom to research and write. I learned so much about myself and about why maybe I was feeling depressed and the things that I can do to change. And it felt really good to be able to bring this into the world. And it's been a really exciting ride. You kind of don't necessarily plan something, but you kind of like take the next step, and then there's these like little breadcrumbs that you follow. And I had no idea when I started this project that I'd be on podcasts and we'd have a book in the world. And it's just been an amazing ride.
I bet. And I'll tell you, I mean, personally, I feel very drawn to this topic, and I'll tell you why. I mean, this is a fertility podcast. I'm
Hmm.
very much into that, but Chinese medicine is
Mm-hmm.
really my background, and in Chinese medicine is really, it's interesting because you look kind of back in the history, and it's very old. Chinese medicine has
Right.
been around for thousands of years, and they still don't really know the origins exactly. They estimate about 3,000, but they think it's longer. But there was a lot of book burning that has happened
Mm.
over the years, and it's really based on Taoism, which is translates as the way, and the way is living in accordance with the laws of nature, and how over time, like when we lose that direction, it can cause disease.
Right. Right.
And yeah, it's really fascinating. So I think it's really cool because this is kind of like modern research on something old, but like coming at it from a different angle but
Hmm.
similar, but it's deriving really at the same essence,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
at the heart of what you do. Yeah, how the laws of nature. What did nature do to get us here? Because
yes.
nature, I like to call it nature and evolution. They were like biohacking, right? That's like this big catchphrase nowadays, like
Hmm.
biohacking. But
Yeah.
making small incremental changes over time, and then see like what improves how you feel and what doesn't. And so
Hmm.
that's what natural selection does. Like the things that improved our survival and improved our well-being and our equilibrium are the things that stayed, and the things that didn't serve us, got selected out. And so I really feel like nature knew what it was doing, and it had millions of years and lots of small little incremental changes that made us who we were for various reasons, for all of the environmental selection and what we needed to do to survive. And yeah, I totally see the ancient how ancient medicine, ancient peoples, indigenous peoples, how they approach well-being. It's not just treating symptoms, it's the holistic, the whole body, all of these different things, that I think thankfully now more and more people like yourself and functional medicine doctors and holistic doctors, people who kind of bring the old and kind of combine it with the new. I think that is really where healthcare needs to go.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I think to myself, like, just really how nature is. And what we've been seeing is that fertility's been on a decline, and nobody really understands exactly what it is that's causing this for men and women. And there are many ideas of just environmental factors, toxins.
Hmm.
EMFs we don't even see, we're not even
Right.
aware of what's going on. It's not natural to the body. The body's not used to it. Like our DNA doesn't respond well to it because it doesn't know what it is and it doesn't know how
Right.
to react. So, really, the basis of Taoism and all of that is that we in our nature are fertile. Nature is
Hmm.
fertile. There's a seed in everything. Everything that grows has a seed because it wants to keep reproducing.
I
And
like that.
yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And I think to myself, some of the things that you guys wrote about were things that I talk about, like sleep and the
Mhm.
circadian rhythm. And so I would love to really start picking your brain on this because
Yeah,
it's really fascinating. It's like really kind of coming home to ourselves and our, the origin of being, going back to that origin
right.
and how we can do that. Sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. So even though fertility has been on a decline, that shouldn't make us lose hope because there are definitely things that we can do to bring ourselves back
Exactly.
to our origin. So, with
Yeah,
that being said, I just want to always give a message of hope because there's always something that you can do. It might take a little extra work just because like the stream is a little strong right now in a certain direction that may be kind of moving us away, but there's definitely
right.
things that we can do. And this is why I love your work so much because it sheds light on things that I think are so important. And so let's cover all of it. Let's start with like
Yeah, yeah.
the first part, and I believe the first part of it is sleep.
Yes, that's the kind of the first fundamental way of being that we cover. It was interesting because I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and one stood out in particular to me, the one with Alison Locke, who
Hmm.
talked about all kinds of environmental things and sleep, and I found myself like nodding along because I was like, well, yeah, health, it contributes to fertility, but then learning about what you guys talked about in that podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, so many of the things that we talk about in our book can be applied to fertility because it's just in order to
Totally.
be fertile and like you said, to access what we're naturally supposed to do, we need to be in a state of well-being, and we need to be able to be in equilibrium, because that's what nature designed us to do. And the very first thing when you started talking about circadian rhythms, I'm like, yes, like,
I
totally.
loved it when I read
Yeah,
it in your book. I was like, yes. I
yeah,
felt the
yeah,
same way.
because so many people like don't necessarily understand that the very first organisms on Earth evolved for circadian rhythms, because you know the in the sea where everything started, the organisms knew like, okay, well, what time of day are the nutrients most available, what
Hmm.
time of day is the safest to undergo cell division. You don't want to necessarily undergo cell division when you're at the surface when the sun's shining on you and you might get DNA damage. So those cells evolved to respond to the rhythms of the earth, because at the very beginning of time, at the very beginning of the earth, there was night and day. We had sunlight, and we had, well, later we had the moon, but um, so like from the very very origins of life, we had this rhythm that tied us to the earth, um, and so even with the smallest cell, and so every living thing has circadian rhythms, has genes. I mean, someone won the Nobel Prize for, I think it was for medicine, discovering that these genes that regulate the rhythms of your body are in everything. Um, and and what's interesting is circadian rhythms
Everything in
are,
your body or just in nature?
everything in your in nature, but also, I think what's important is some people are like, oh well, we're evolved past that. Like humans don't have circadian rhythms, because we're sophisticated beings, and what's interesting is we haven't evolved away from circadian rhythms, but our culture has pushed us away. And
Hmm.
our technology has pushed us away. So we might not think that, oh, well, we don't need these to tell us what to do because, but the problem is our society and our individuals, we override what our body's trying to tell us. We override the signals that circadian rhythms are trying to give us. Um,
You're
so,
speaking my language. I literally say that all the time. We override it. It's
yeah,
wow. I just love this.
that's awesome. Yeah, I I feel like, I mean, that's one of the main things in the book is, yes, the modern world is great and modern culture brings so many great things, but we have to be aware of like our bio, like we have to be aware of what our bodies are telling us. And people are they're so focused on the future, they're so distracted, or they want to stay up and watch another 3 episodes on Netflix for
Mhm.
and not sleep, or stay up and work
Yeah,
until
those
2
things
in
are
the morning.
designed to be addictive. I feel like it's like the fast
Yeah.
food of like of shows.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like you said, it all starts with a good night's sleep. And And what was interesting when we were studying this is that a lot of the indigenous peoples who are still surviving in these far out, they've been pushed to the fringes, to not even the most hospitable places on earth. They're kind of been pushed to kind of, the places that we didn't want, like the modern people didn't want. But studying them, it's not like they got so much sleep, and it's not like but what was really important was they were completely in tune with the sun rising and the sun setting, and their bodies responded to that. So when you think about nowadays, we get up and we kind of have, uh, there's someone in our book that I can't remember who it was. It's like we live a twilight existence, right? We never get the same amount of light that the sun would give us, but we get it all straight through the day, right?
Hmm.
Whereas if we were living according to our natures, we'd get lots of sunlight in the morning, really intense bright sunlight in the morning. And then it goes down. And then once the sun goes down, there's no exposure. Um, except firelight and moonlight. And what was interesting about what I love to know about blue light, because blue light's this big thing right now, right? Like, but the reason why we're so reactive to blue light is because that is the wavelength of light that penetrated the sea. And so that's where life started. So the reason why we could have been attuned to any wavelength of light, but we were attuned to the blue light because of where our origins were. Um, so getting lots of blue light, sunlight in the morning, but then not getting blue light after it goes down, after the sun goes down, it helps our bodies like reset. Like, okay, this is when our melatonin hormone is going to go up. Um, and then once the sun goes down, the melatonin starts to be produced, and then there's this window where you're tired, and if you're listening to your body, that's when you go to sleep. And then if you're in tune with the earth, the indigenous people that were studied, they woke up at the same time every day, um, and got that bright sunlight in the morning. So it was just really amazing to see, like, these people, they sleep on the ground or on some skins, and they sleep on their arms. And if you look at the difference, I think there's a picture in the book. Like, our beds are so comfortable, um, but they didn't even know what insomnia was, because they didn't
Hmm.
really experience it. It wasn't a problem. They were so in tune with the natural rhythms of the earth, and they listened to their bodies, that they just didn't have problems with sleep. Um, and so that was a huge, like, eye-opening thing to me. Like,
Yeah.
you think like, oh, well, humans have always struggled with sleep, um, and there are some people who struggle, but what's really cool about people who have different genetics, different circadian genetics, is that those night owls, people who can't fall asleep till late in the evening, and have trouble getting up. That was an evolutionary advantage, because there needed to be people to be sentinels to keep the rest of us safe.
Hmm.
And because we had these amazing brains, we needed to have really good, high quality, deep sleep. And some of the reasons why, maybe animals in the wild don't necessarily get really deep sleep is because they have to be kind of aware of their surroundings. But humans, we got together into big groups, and we protected each other. And so as our brains evolved and as our sleep evolved, we were able to get really dense, good quality sleep in a very short time. And because when you're asleep, you're pretty helpless.
Hmm.
Especially
Yeah.
some of the cycles of sleep, you're like you're literally paralyzed. Your body's paralyzed. So the people who are early risers or late, the night owls, they're actually helped us survive because they were alert at times when the other people weren't. So
It's
I've talked
fascinating.
to a researcher, and he said, well, so oftentimes people who have these delayed sleep phases or um, advanced sleep phases, once they realize it, it's evolutionary, and like it like really helps them like put it into perspective. Nothing's wrong with them. It's just part
Right.
of how they evolved. So
That's
all
interesting.
that
That
stuff
is
just
so
fascinates me.
fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting. But as you're telling me, it's really the regularity of that. It's that pulse, that rhythm. and sticking with that rhythm. And interestingly enough, there's definitely a correlation with circadian rhythm dysfunction and menstrual cycle health. So, and that's kind of our larger rhythm for women. And that would be an interesting topic for you to kind of go into, is maybe make a series on this with women's health and the cycles and how that
Yeah.
impacts it, because it's really fascinating. I mean, we need that rhythm. Like, our bodies really respond to that rhythm of nature. And once it
Hmm.
has that really intact, then our bodies get more regulated. I had the same thing myself, and this is how I got into Chinese medicine, is because I had irregular periods, but I also had irregular sleep, and it was so many irregularities. And I feel like it's almost like a train getting derailed. You have to put it
Hmm.
back on track and then have that rhythm set again.
Right. That's exactly right. Um, and what's amazing is that, so in the book we don't necessarily talk about fertility, but some of the reasons why we have these diseases of modernity, and I guess you could say like infertility and endometriosis. What you and Allison talked about, which was fascinating to me, was that all the things that we had, that women struggle with, PMS, pain, mood swings, all of those things are kind of unnatural. Like the severe symptoms of menstruation that women get are unnatural, and that like blew my mind.
Hmm.
um so but we don't necessarily talk about fertility, but inflammation, stress, cortisol levels, your gut health, all of these things we talk about in the book, and all of those things that you talk about impact your fertility.
Yeah.
So getting a good cycle started, getting back on track, is like a really good place to start, um, because there you know when you don't get a good night's sleep, you feel tired, and being tired for your whole day just sets everything back. You can't eat properly when you're tired. You don't want to exercise when you're tired,
Yeah.
you know.
And when you're overtired, it's hard to sleep. That's the weird thing.
Yeah,
It's kind of hard to get back into that rhythm, like one way or the other.
because your body's in a stress state. Once
Yeah.
when you have a
Very
sleep
heightened.
deficit, your body starts to be in like more of a fight or flight, and then your body keeps you awake because there's like, well, there must be a reason why I have to be awake right now, so I'm going to help you. I'm going to
Hmm.
help you be
Yeah.
awake. um, and all the diseases that come from, I heard you talk about shift work, that people who do shift work have infertility. um, but shift work has been classified as a carcinogen
Hmm.
because of their dysregulated circadian rhythms. Like, humans weren't meant to work at night.
Hmm.
That doesn't tell people, like, because shift work is really important. There's so many professions that it's important to, but people who do that just need to be aware so they can compensate for that.
Right. Exactly.
It's not like, oh, shift work bad. Shift work is vital for some people.
Hmm.
But they need to know that that is going to predispose them to some things, and they need to take preventative measures, to make sure that their shift works, and their circadian rhythms aren't, or that their circadian rhythms being not in sync with the earth.
Hmm.
um, they just need to remember that they need to try to mitigate some of the effects from that.
So when
So,
they have breaks, getting like more early morning sunlight or something to
yeah.
kind of like quickly anchor them, I like earthing, putting your feet on the earth.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
was saying, I thought about that when you were saying people used to sleep on the earth, and how that lowers inflammation. And then also the natural aspect of really connecting with like soil
Hmm.
and the microbiomes that impact our gut health. So let's talk a little bit on the nutrition
Okay.
aspect of it. So what are some of the things that you uncovered that are really more natural to us? And I noticed that you talked about all the highly processed food and how that is like really not in line with our own digestive system and our body's ability to process them.
Yeah. Well, if in the book we talk about how, from when, we had the common ancestor with chimpanzees and bonobos. So we talk about kind of what their diet would be like, and how changes in the environment changed our diet. And then changes in the environment and then changes in our diet actually were some of the things that allowed us to evolve bigger brains. Because when the environment changed, when the Great Rift came in Africa and split Africa into East Africa and West Africa, the East African side, the climate changed so much. It lost trees, it became more savanna, it became more grassland. And in order to survive, the animals, or the early primates that were stuck on that side needed to evolve or they wouldn't survive. They lost their tree food, which was mostly fruits, leaves, and things like that. Food became farther apart. So we lost our ability to climb through trees, but we gained bipedalism and stature and being able to hold things in our hands when we walked. Um, and we needed to find new sources of carbohydrates. So we started finding really high quality, dense carbohydrates in like roots and tubers and things like that that we really didn't need when we lived in the trees because we had all this fruit to feed our brains. Um, but some of the cultural things that we needed, like now all the animals, there were bigger animals and on the savannah. And so we had to increase our intellect in order to be able to eat the larger animals and to figure out how to dig up those tubers. So our brain's size evolved, our intellect evolved, but then in order to support that brain and our intellect, we had to find the foods that supported the evolution. So like the story of nutrition and the story of evolution, especially the evolution of our brains, is so tied together. Um, so it's like if you talk about nutrition, you have to talk about the evolution of our nutrition if you want to talk about the evolution of our bodies, because
Mm-hmm.
our big brain and another reason why we got big brains is because our guts were able to shrink. So we have very short guts compared to other primates, and that's for two reasons. One is you were able to all the nutrients and resources that are required to maintain your gut can now be shifted over and maintain your brain.
Mm-hmm.
But we had shorter guts. So we needed to find more energy dense food that was easier to digest. So we started to eat more and more animal meat and animal fat, because those are easier to digest. Plants have things that are like, don't eat me. We need to kind of get rid of
Uh-huh.
some of those things. Um, but again, we got to use our intellect to learn how to hunt these bigger creatures, but also to process food. Like we you can't eat a potato raw, but we
Mm-hmm.
learned how to process food to make it easier to digest. So
Mm-hmm.
our guts could remain small and we'd still get all the nutrients that we need, but our brains will still also get what it needs. Um, so we started to process foods. And when I mean process, it doesn't mean like the modern day processing of foods,
Yeah.
because when our ancestors processed foods, cooked it or ground it or fermented it, they
Mm-hmm.
still ate the entire food. They still ate the whole food. There was
Mm-hmm.
nothing that got thrown out. Um, and so they processed the food to make it easier to digest. But all of the nutrients of the food came into our bodies. Um, and for our gut health, that was really important. The fiber was really important that we would eat. And so now these ultra processed foods that we have nowadays, there's just no fiber in them. It's just sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And the consumption of this much sugar, it doesn't have any precedence.
And chemicals.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, let's not even start talking about all the artificial stuff
Yeah.
that gets put in there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you were saying like our bodies just don't know how to handle it because over the last 300 years, so the agricultural revolution changed eating forever. But I feel like in the last 200 years since the industrial revolution, things have changed so quickly. I mean, I think we went from eating like 4 pounds of sugar a year like 300 years ago to now people eat 150 to 200 pounds of sugar a year,
That's just crazy.
which is just,
Yeah.
it's totally crazy. And something we talk about in the book, it's like we have this evolutionary mismatch because genes can't evolve that quickly, right? We can't rely on our bodies to adapt to this much sugar intake, right? But something that's really cool about humans is a lot of these big things in our life, big hurdles that we needed to get over, we didn't need to evolve because we have our intellect and because we have culture. And so so we could bypass evolution to fix problems. So, what the good news about this is we can still bypass our lack of evolution to fix this problem, right?
Mhm.
Because if we know that the way we're eating, our bodies literally have not adapted, it takes hundreds of thousands of years for adaptations to make its way through, an entire population. Um, but if we know it, we can intellectually make the changes we need to make. So that's the good news. We don't have to be like, oh, well, I wish our bodies would catch up, so I
Mhm.
can continue to eat this highly processed food. No, just stop eating it. eat
Yeah.
eat the whole foods. And then
Right.
you don't have to worry about, that your body's not that your body's mismatched, because now you're now living more in alignment with what
Right.
your genes want, what your body wants.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so important because and it is something that a lot of people are talking about now. Luckily, I think it's
Yes.
becoming like more front and center. For a little while there, nobody even paid attention to it. And it was
Right.
also it was interesting because people were like afraid of fats and everything
Right.
was sugar. For a while, I think we were completely, as a society, blind to it until recently. I think people are starting to wake up to it.
Yeah, yeah. And when those studies came out that demonized fat,
Yep.
um,
They were funded by sugar companies.
exactly, yeah, because the same findings came out about sugar, but for some reason the establishment focused on fat. Um, and we do have a problem with fat. It's
Hmm.
not because we're eating necessarily too much of it; it's because we're eating all the wrong kinds of fats,
Right.
in the
Trans
wrong
fats
ratios.
and
And
yeah.
so, but also we're eating like the fats we're eating are like processed fats, vegetable, all these oils that are processed, that you stick some of the oil and all this processed sugar together, and pretty much 90% of the things in the grocery store are made up of these things. The sugar that we never used to eat and the type of fat that we never used to eat, all of these processed fats. Um, so, so yeah, I'm glad that now sugar is coming out as being a villain in and of itself, but it's also to say, well, our bodies need sugar, but we
Hmm.
need to have it in a form that digests slower,
Right.
that goes into our bloodstream slower, that helps our insulin levels be more regulated, and we need to have the fiber that's still in there to help our gut health.
Right.
Because if we just eat straight processed sugar all the time, it's like I read somewhere, it's like fertilizer runoff causes these algae blooms. Like
Hmm.
one type of algae just takes over an entire ecosystem because that's the one algae that like really like that fertilizer.
Right.
But if we're just eating sugar, all the beneficial bacteria, they're like, no, I want fiber. But this one gut bacteria is like, sugar, sugar, give me more sugar. So you
Yeah.
lose, one dominates, and you lose the diversity, um, of the bacteria in your gut.
Well, when you were talking before and you were saying about how they ate the whole fruit or the foods
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't take parts, it wasn't like it was really eaten with the fiber. So usually the things that have naturally sugar have fiber as well. Most of
Mm-hmm.
the time, you'll
Yeah,
find, fruits, most of them have fiber.
right.
So having even the juice of just natural fruits is not quite the same as having it as its whole, like in its whole nature.
Right, right, exactly. Because I mean, it's funny because our whole goal, evolutionary goal, in order to feed our brains with our shorter guts, we needed nutrient dense, easily digestible food, right? But we took it way too far. Because when we were doing it right, it was just us preparing the food, right? As soon as we had the technological advancements, for now we don't prepare the food, and the industrial complex prepares this food. It's no longer in our control.
Yeah.
Um, and so, what sells most? The things that are the most palatable, the things that are energy dense, and the things that are easy to digest. And so, with the advent of technology and the Industrial Revolution, we took that evolutionary goal way too far,
Hmm.
um, because it was a goal of ours. I mean, there is a reason why sugar is addictive, because when we ate sugar, as our ancestors ate sugar, it was you would receive dopamine because
Hmm.
you needed to have glucose in your body. Your brain needs it to function. Your brain just uses sugar. The rest of some of the other parts of your body use, other things to fuel it, fats and things like that to fuel it primarily. But our brains need sugar. So there's an evolutionary reason why sugar is addictive.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't
That's
we
interesting.
just couldn't get our hands on it. We ate honey occasionally and we ate fruit, but like this much sugar and processed and basically like white flour, all the fiber is stripped out of it. That's pretty much just eating sugar
Yeah.
because of the way that it just gets absorbed into your bloodstream.
Yeah, it's empty
Um,
calories. It's just not really like it doesn't give you much bang for your buck at all.
right, right, right. But it does give you a release of dopamine and you feel
Yep.
good,
Right.
because we need to have that. But now again, we needed to have this instinct, but now we have our intellect. And so
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, we need to have a well-rounded diet, with carbohydrates and fats and proteins, but we know intellectually, oh, I'm craving that because, I evolved to crave it, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to eat it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can eat other things that gives me the same thing. And I find, and I've found this, and I've heard lots of people say once they start eating whole foods, the cravings for the potato chips and the
Mm-hmm.
brownies and the cookies, you just don't have those anymore,
Correct. Yeah,
right?
it feels like I think the difficult thing is that it feels like it's going to be forever, the suffering or the discomfort of the cravings or the
Right.
withdrawal. It feels like it's going to be like that forever. It's really not. I would say
No.
2 weeks, about 2 weeks,
Yeah.
maybe three, but like really, even the first week is a big one. And then once you get through that, you're feeling better. And then
Right.
once you overcome that, it doesn't feel like anything. It really, you don't miss it. So,
I
and
don't,
it's
yeah,
just,
it's pretty amazing. I don't miss it. And
yeah,
then when I do, have to have dessert, when I'm out with friends or, special occasions, I don't feel very good the next day. Like I enjoy eating it.
yeah,
But sometimes it's almost like, whoa, it's too sweet.
yeah,
Um, but then, you just have to realize, yeah, it's okay to indulge once in a while, but know that you're going to feel awful. But that also
yeah.
just reinforces that you're doing the right thing.
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have a lot of my patients when we talk about diet and then they go to on a cruise and that's when they feel it. They're like, oh my God, I never realized like how this made me feel. And then
Right.
they feel the difference. And I'm like, that's actually a good thing. I'm happy you went through that because it really shows you like you could really legitimately feel the difference from feeling good. When you're used to feeling bad, you almost don't know the difference until you feel good again. And that's kind
Exactly.
of like
You don't
another
know any better.
interesting, yeah, you don't know better. But it's crazy how your body resists too much sugar and then it starts to get insulin resistance. Like it's literally your body's like, whoa, like stop. And it kind of creates whatever ecosystem response to that. But it just shows you that your body doesn't like it.
Right. Um, the majority of the things that people go to the doctor for now, humans never used to get. I mean, yeah, humans got communicable diseases, but now we have all of these non-communicable diseases,
Hmm.
the metabolic syndromes, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, hypertension. All of these things are solely due to lifestyle.
Hmm.
There's some people who have genetic predispositions to things. So that doesn't help that the lifestyle that's presented to us, the lifestyle that's marketed to us, doesn't help those people either. They have a worse time of it if they're genetically predisposed to some of these diseases. Um, but those diseases, just we never used to die of those
Hold on
diseases.
1 second. Bye. It's my daughter.
No worries. So that was another thing. I'm like, you're right. And what's people like if it was a disease that affected everyone in their childhood, we would have evolved. So whatever predisposition to that disease, we would have evolved away from it because the goal of evolution is to reproduce. And if you don't make it to reproductive age, you don't reproduce. So all of
Hmm.
like if these problems happened early in childhood, they would have been evolved out because you want to get to the point where you can reproduce and pass your genes on. But
Hmm.
all of these diseases of modernity happen after you're fertile, after you have kids for the most part. A lot of it kind of starts,
Right, right.
lifestyle starts. but that's why it's just so prevalent, because it doesn't affect our evolutionary success. Evolutionary success is to have offspring, right?
Mhm.
So it's affecting us later in life, and it's affecting our quality of life. So,
Right.
like, yeah, we might still live to be 75, but how many of those years are really good years? Like, when do you start
Yeah, that's
having these
true.
debilitating illnesses that affect your quality of life? Um, so the hunter gatherers and our ancestors, who we have models of today, if they get past childhood and aren't forced to leave the land and be people, become who they're not with their lifestyle changes, they live very, very healthily into their 70s.
Yeah.
Um, and that because they're so healthy, they're able to, they're contributing members of the group. Um, they're not debilitated to the point where people have to give them resources. They're still in the mix. They're still contributing. Um, and that's because they're healthy.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting how, I mean, just kind of being in your nature, your body responds to living kind of in accordance to the Tao. It's really
Yeah.
like it comes full circle to that. And then speaking of also just balance, let's talk about work and rest and how much we as Americans and really modern culture, I think
Hmm.
pretty much anywhere are overworking and there's barely any time to rest. I actually just spoke to my cousin. She's been having gut issues and I told her eat earlier because she's been eating like really late every day. She goes, I can't. She goes, by the time I get home, it's 7 p.m. She goes, I cannot leave earlier. I'm like, what? It just sounds so crazy. So she
Yeah.
comes home really late and she wants to cook and have dinner with her husband. So it's really tough because I mean, it's just insane hours. Like, so how do you
Yeah.
even work around that? But yeah,
Yeah.
so talk about that and what you've discovered.
Well, I think what's interesting about our ancestors is they didn't have to worry about work and life balance because it was integrated, right? Their work life and their home life, it was all together. Um, so they considered it was another way of looking at it holistically. Like, now we think we have our work and then we have our home,
Yeah.
but their work was part of their everyday. But they also, what was really cool is that they didn't they worked until they had what they needed and then they stopped. It was a very, someone coined this phrase, an immediate return um, economy,
Mm.
because they had such a different concept of time than we do. And they had such, they lived off the earth, and they knew that whatever they needed, they would be provided, that they didn't necessarily plan for the future. They worked until their needs were met. They listened to their bodies and, like, okay, I'm not hungry anymore. I'm kind of tired. I'm going to go rest.
Hmm.
Um, Agriculture changed all that, because now we went from an immediate return economy to a delayed return economy. You planted crops and then you waited, and everything depended on this future outcome. And so
Hmm.
in today's world, we work now and we get a paycheck later. So it's another kind of way that we delayed our
Hmm.
our return on our investment, I guess. um, and so the way we look at work now, we never work in the present. We're always working. There's a
So
deadline. There's
interesting.
this,
Yeah.
that we have this. And so in the book we talk about how rest and meditation really helps, because we can't go back to an immediate return economy. You can't just be like, oh, I've made enough
Yeah.
money, I'm gonna quit my job, or I'm gonna go home when my hours are this. But how you approach work can really change the outcomes of work. Like, if you stay in the present moment, not only can you lower your stress, but you can also see what's really important. If you're worried about some future project, you're not going to be very efficient in the moment doing what you need to do. um, so it's kind of a mindset shift.
Yeah. Definitely.
Also, I think our society puts puts emphasis and puts people on the pedestal who work long hours and who make a lot of money. And so that, and who have a lot
It
of
conditions.
stuff.
It
Yeah, well,
conditions you.
yeah. We have, I mean, I think I read it and it's in the book, an entire, I don't know, group of hunter gatherers had fewer possessions than a single farmer after the agricultural revolution. They just didn't have stuff.
Right.
They didn't, and so once you have stuff, now you're like, you need to buy more stuff. And to buy more stuff, you need to make more money. And to keep up with the Joneses, you need to make even more money so you can buy more expensive stuff and
Hmm.
buy a bigger house and then fill that house up with stuff. And then your
Right.
house doesn't fit your stuff. So now you have a storage unit where you have to put your stuff. Um, and so our emphasis on what's important in our society and what our society values is causing this work epidemic. I also think that people need to learn from an early age not to tie their identity with their achievements, tie their identity with work, because I think we live in a place where it's kind of a meritocracy, where the people who are successful are just people, and they're
Hmm.
just as good. The people who aren't successful, who are working their butts off every day but enjoying their life, they're still they're successful people, right?
Hmm.
They're not necessarily like making millions of dollars, but we idolize those people who make so much money, when really they might not have the best work-life balance.
Yeah, it's
Probably not.
interesting.
I
It's
mean, I've never heard someone say, oh, on your deathbed, I wish I'd had more money.
right. It's
you know
100% true. Well, that's because it's an illusion. It's this
yeah.
illusion, and the ancients talked about that, the samsara and the illusion. It's like a matrix. We're living in a matrix. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it kind of is, because it's this set code of ways of being, and it causes us to continue moving into the future or thinking about the past and never being present. And the ancients always talked about now, becoming more
Mhm.
present, more alive. And even with meditation, we know that it really makes your body work better. This presence, being
Mhm.
present, having your attention is like gold. Having your attention in the now actually infuses your body with more vitality. And if you think about the
Mhm.
ancients, I mean, their focus was 100% when they were hunting or whatever they were
Mhm.
doing,
Mhm.
they were present, like really, really fully present.
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost a survival. It was a survival mechanism. You had to be present so you could be, and this is kind of dovetails really nicely into the nature chapter, because they were present in the moment and they were present in their environment, right?
Hmm.
They could say, oh, there was a deer came through here, there's that broken branch, or they hear something, I think that's a predator, we need to go this way, or they're so attuned to their bodies and to the world around them that they lived in the present moment. I mean, there's this stress reduction theory, um, of nature, that natural environments, lower your stress and promote recovery, because yes, it has information, but it has low levels of information that you need to be processing at all times. Um, but when you are downtown in a big city walking around, there's cars driving by and there's people and
Loud
there's
noises.
loud noises, and so your senses are overwhelmed with all of these things to process. And now, where's my phone? Now
Yes.
we are overwhelmed by all of this information, all of the things that are just right at our fingertips.
Hmm.
So no wonder we're stressed, no wonder.
We're overwhelmed. It's
Yeah,
like
we're overwhelmed all the
too much
time.
information all the time, and it overwhelms our minds. And that's why one of the things that I think is actually releasing is important, especially now. So when we're meditating or releasing kind of like the excess, doing less, getting more into this yin phase of less and more harmony and more quiet, that's why we need it, because we're in such a young active mode all the time, nonstop, 24/7,
Mhm.
and that's considered good. I
Right.
remember, because
People brag
I
about it.
worked in New York, and it was like the city that never sleeps. That's amazing. It's like the best thing ever. And I
Right.
remember what it did to my nervous system. It wasn't good.
Yeah, I remember when I was in graduate school, like we used to compare, well, how late were you up last night? Oh, I was in the lab until 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even go to sleep last night. It, it's the hustle culture that's idolized, not
Hmm.
And what needs to be idolized is this slower culture where you actually enjoy at the moment by moment. I mean, I've noticed, I mean, people always say, oh, time is moving so fast. It's because we don't spend any time in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're spending time in the future, or we're spending time in the past, and very few people actually experience every moment in the present. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if we experience moments in the present, time would seem slower. Um, Time wouldn't seem to be just rushing by, rushing by, rushing by. And
Yeah.
I know, when you have kids, it seems that way because you actually see time passing as they're growing up. Um, but I found that I feel like when I'm less distracted, when I'm more relaxed, when I'm in the present moment, that's when you live. That's when you live. There's no other place to experience life except in the present moment. Everything else is
Mm-hmm.
just in your imagination, in your mind.
Yeah, and
So,
when I work with people, I always talk about that. Like, because if you can get as present as possible, and it's hard when you're trying to get to a
mhm,
goal, it could be the goal is pregnancy or whatever that goal is. But if you can work on getting as present as possible, you are actually infusing life force into
mhm,
your moment to moment. You're more
yeah.
alive. When you're more
Oh,
alive, your
yeah.
body's more alive. When your body's more alive, you're more fertile. So these are things that timeless again, things that we've
Mhm.
been told for centuries.
Right.
And it's always go within, go, where we have that innate knowing, that connection with our earth, that like typically our body's communicating with us. I mean, this is such a fascinating conversation. I could talk to you for hours because it's just,
I
there's so much to uncover. I mean, we're
I
really literally talking about the nature of humanity and like where we came from. And
right.
there's just so much. And I can see why you would want to do a series on this. And I would be fascinated by that in the future as
Cool.
well. But for people who are listening and they're like, "Ooh, this sounds really interesting," how can they find you and get to the book?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we have a website, www.ontheoriginofbeing.com. There's a link to places there. You can really buy it anywhere, any online retailer that you like, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's other, places. I know people want to support smaller businesses and things like that. But it's available on online retailers. We have our website, and we have a Facebook page at On the Origin of Being, and I'm most active on Instagram at On the Origin of Being. That's where I try to post at least once a day, little tidbits or news, or like you said, this topic is so fertile. I don't feel like I'm ever going to run out of things to post about,
Yeah,
because even if I'm posting about sleep, there's a million things I could post about sleep. There's a million
right.
things I could post about nutrition. Um, so it and what's been amazing is I was off social media for 10 at least 10 years because it wasn't good for my mental health. And when you have a book coming out, you kind of have to be out there a little bit. And so I was really worried. But what I have found is there is this community of people like you, of like-minded people who see, who have their eyes open, who see like this is the way we're living is killing us.
Hmm.
And they really, really care about other people and their health, and they really, really care about the environment. And so I feel like there's this community online that I just hope to see it swell even bigger and bigger. I felt so supported, and so it's just so nice to meet other people who are going through this journey and who have platforms like you who want to get the word out. I feel there's these just genuine people who care, and that's made my experience of being back in social media and getting back out into the world and promoting this book feel so much more comfortable. Just that's just an observation that I've had over the last few months. It's really been an amazing experience.
That's awesome to hear. And yeah, it's like anything, everything has like the pluses and minuses. And I think that that's what it is. If you come into social media, really
Hmm.
taking advantage and using it for the good, it's like anything, it's like money. People could
Right?
say money is evil, but it's actually something that could be
It's a tool,
used to help a lot of people. So
right?
it depends really on the intention behind it. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
when your intention is connected to purpose, then it's a lot of fun. Then you're like, okay,
Oh, I
this
like
is
that.
really, yeah,
I
exactly.
like that. Connection is, yeah, it's totally neat. Yeah. So we're on there. Yeah, and it just came out this week. I don't know when this is going to be airing, but the book came out this week. I think we've hit some number one like bestseller statuses in a couple of different
Awesome.
categories, and
That's great.
so it's been a very exciting time.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on the book. And this is fascinating. And I think it's so important because I think that as a society, we're craving to come back to our origins. We really
I
crave
agree.
that. And I think that we lost it. And so
Hmm.
this rekindles a memory because I think that we do store memories in our DNA. There is
Yeah,
that kind of knowing that when we hear something, it resonates as true. There's a reason
yeah.
for that. I think
Oh
it's
my
because
gosh,
it's a
totally.
memory that got just awakened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the good news is we still are running our hunter gatherer software. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We have all these capabilities inside of us still. We haven't evolved since, we maybe, for the most part, we haven't evolved since we were hunter gatherers. And it's still in there. We just have to we have to find it. And I think
Yes.
learning about evolution and learning about how we got here will really help us make better decisions now. Because, like I said, we can adapt with our minds, we can adapt to anything. We're smart.
Yeah.
We just have to do the work.
Yes. Amen. So, Jenny, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. And I look forward to any future work that you do.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you today, too.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.